Hey everyone, welcome to my sewing and DIY channel. This video is the first of many of my pattern drafting series, and in this video today I'll be showing you my process of drafting a body sloper using instructions from a vintage 1968 book. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about what a body sloper is and why you might want to draft one. So a body sloper is basically like a foundation pattern. It's meant to fit really snugly on your body and kind of look like a second layer of skin basically, and it is the mother of all patterns. With a body sloper drafted and fitted to your body, you can then move on to learn to draft and design basically anything. I want to say practically anything you desire. This is not my first time drafting a body sloper. I've done it before and I've used my sloper to make a number of different garments here on this channel before. But with all the changes that's been happening, I just felt like I needed to make a new one again. And I was really curious about this book from the 60s and I really wanted to try out the method. I just like engineering and tinkering and experimenting. The drafting and pattern making book that I'm using to draft my body sloper this time is called Pattern Drafting and Grading. I was lucky enough to have found a copy on eBay for a decent price because it is known to be hideously expensive. But okay, if you want a copy, don't fret. I got a little secret for you. You can find a copy of this book online for free. This book is actually in the public domain and you can find a copy of it for free online via archive.org. So if you think you'd like to follow along and try out this vintage method of drafting a bodice with me, I have a link to the book in the description box. So make sure you check that out and download a copy of the book. Okay, so back to the video and back to what I'm doing here. This video is not exactly a tutorial on how to draft it because the instructions are pretty clear and straightforward, but it's more of a this is how I did it and hopefully you get some tips and ideas on how to do it yourself too type of video. And I'll be going through 3 key things in this video. Number 1, how I took measurements of my body to draft the sloper. Number 2, how I drafted the pattern, the tools that I used, and some of the specific steps that I went through, which page to look at. And number 3, some of the key things that you might want to take note of and some things that I changed in the drafting process. So, I started off by taking measurements of my own body to prepare for the drafting process. For this step, I wore a snug t-shirt so I don't have to worry about the thickness of the fabric from my clothes adding on to my body measurements. For my body sloper drafting, I followed the drafting instructions from this page of the book under the Juniors, Misses, and Women section, and these are the measurements needed to draft the bodice. To help me with the process of measuring my own body, I used a flexible measuring tape, a 1/4 inch wide elastic tied around my waist as a landmark, and a piece of tape. To take the measurement of my back shoulder height, I taped the measuring tape on my shoulders and tried to stand as normally as I could without slouching or overextending my back. I took note of the number at my waist and subtracted that with the length of the measuring tape before that blue tape. Next, I tried to take the measurement of the length across my back from one armhole to another, but it ended up being actually pretty tricky trying to do it alone. So to get the right measurement, I actually ended up taking a static photo and checking the measurement based on the photo. Next, I took the measurement of my shoulder seam. You can see that the start of the measuring tape is where my shoulders meet the bottom of my neck. And I was trying to feel my bones and feel where the shoulders start sloping down to have a sense of where the armhole is supposed to be. You will also notice that I'm taking the measurements of both my left and right sides of my body. I did that for most of the things that I had to measure, and I also repeated the same process for the same side, meaning taking the same measurement multiple times and then taking the average number to try to get the most accurate value. To measure the center back length, I used the same trick of taping the measuring tape on my back, then reading the number at my waist and subtracting the length of the measuring tape before the blue tape. And here is how I measured my bust line. This one is a little bit more straightforward. I brought the measuring tape around my bust and made sure that I had it sitting horizontally across my body and sitting on the highest point of my bust. Next, I measured my side seam length. I placed the start of my measuring tape right under my armpit and not quite deep in the pit. I would say maybe like an inch from the deep of the pit. Yeah, just sitting right under it. And then again, I read the number located at my waist, which I have already marked out with my 1/4 inch elastic. Then I measured the front shoulder height, starting from the point between the bottom of my neck and the start of my shoulder, taking the measuring tape over the highest point of my bust, and then ending at my waist. You'll notice that I'm trying not to look down at the measuring tape too much and just looking far, because bending over will actually lead to an error in measurement and make the length shorter than it's supposed to be. Next, I measured out my front chest length. I used the same trick of using a sticky tape to secure the measuring tape, and then took the measurement between the bottom of the front of my neck to my waist. Again, I'm staring far ahead and not bending forward to check the number. And finally, I took the measurement across the front of my chest from armhole to armhole like this. So I've got all my measurements taken, and now it's time to draft the sloper. I feel like I should have bought some proper white grid paper for the drafting, but I was being cheap and I bought like this huge roll of pink butcher's paper, and that's what I'm probably gonna be stuck with for like a year or so. So yeah. So this is kind of like the type of paper you want to get for drafting. It comes with these letters and numbers arranged in a grid, so you can draw straight lines at right angles pretty easily. I could do the same with mine, but it's just that I had to take a few more steps each time I draw a straight line to make sure that my lines are at right angles. Moving on, to draft the sloper, you need erasers and pencils, and more importantly, you need a straight ruler and a French curve ruler. The French curve ruler is needed for these curves specifically. If you don't have the French curve ruler, you could potentially print a 2D version of it off the internet, or if you have a good eye for these things, free-handed. Okay, so I'm not showing you all the steps to drafting because it's pretty much laid out on this page of the drafting book. So following the steps in the book, this is pretty much how it went. And this is what my sloper looks like. So there were a few steps where I was like, wait, what is the measurement? And I just used the number provided in the book. For reference, I'm pretty close to a vintage junior size 11. So when picking which number to use, I just used the numbers that's provided in the first column over here. So when drawing the line C to D, I used 2 inches as the back shoulder slope depth. And then for the front shoulder slope depth for Q to R, I also used the number provided, which is 1 1/4 inches. And when drawing F to I, it's supposed to be about half of F to G, but when I was trying to draw it, it just didn't look quite right to me. So I just used 4 1/8 inch that was provided in the book. Okay, here's the other thing. The instructions for joining point G to point H actually says to take your half bust plus 2 inches to allow up to 4 inches of ease in the final pattern. But that's what I don't want. I want a snug fitting sloper. So I did not add that extra 2 inches, and I only used my half bust measurement.
So I couldn't join all the dots together from R to W to Y to M to make the front armhole. So I kind of just let my French curve ruler be my guide and drew the line going from R, then kind of going between W and Y and ending at M. Out of the blue, the drafting step also asks for the distance between the bust and the breast line, or rather, like between the underarm line to the highest point of the bust. The suggested number was 2 inches, but I measured myself and it was 4 inches, so I used 4 inches in my drafting instead. Now, after drafting everything, I actually suddenly realized, wait, I didn't actually have to use my waist measurement in drafting this at all. I probably should have checked my waist measurement by adding these sections up and multiplying it by 2 to see if there's a difference. But I forgot, so my first draft ended up being a little too small around my waist, which you have a little peek at the end of the video.
So at this stage, I am at my 3rd revision of the muslin, and I am still wondering if I should make a 4th version. Stay tuned next week to see how I sewed up my muslin and to learn about the modifications that I've had to make along the way for the body sloper to fit me better. And it is also after sewing like 3 versions of the sloper that I realized, wait, I think maybe the instructions that I used is supposed to be for a dress bodice, meaning it's supposed to have a little bit of ease built into it already. And then I also went on to look through more of the pages in the book and found this little section that's called drafting a fitted bodice or something, and there's this method that's called the quote-unquote special measurement method. So maybe that's a method that I should have used for this purpose, but anyway, it's fine. It's gonna work out. Leave a comment and let me know if you're gonna be checking out this book, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more pattern making adventures. I will see you in the next video for more sewing, DIY, and a little bit of fun. Bye! Okay, so remember I was talking about drafting a new bodice sloper with that vintage book? This is the first look.